I want to welcome Derek Cummings, who is a plumbing professional, a wicked guy, and someone who's going to answer all of our questions when it comes to plumbing and real estate. We want to give people all the information that they need to know. What are the biggest things that buyers need to look for plumbing wise before they buy a house?
A couple things. I'll start with water lines. The number one thing is if you have a lead or a galvanized water line coming into your house, over time the lead deteriorates. So little particles of lead, like microscopic particles, will break off in the water supply. Obviously, nobody wants to drink out of lead. It's not healthy for you. And I mean, city water is generally, they say it's safe, it's always chlorinated and stuff, but if you could see the stuff that goes into like the main water mains even in the street, I've seen them when they cut into the mains and all the dirt and everything that will get in the mains when they're cutting into them. And like the water lines in Toronto, they're all ductile steel. And I'm assuming that's like the same with a lot of municipalities in the area. And they're just, it's just like not the best stuff on the inside of the drains. And if some people are worried about drinking out of plastics and BPAs. And so all the new stuff is just big plastic water lines. So just, in my opinion, it's just not the best thing to drink out of, I don't think. The main plumbing thing you should do is find where your water meter is and find out how to shut your house off. It's something that happened if you have a burst pipe, if something freezes over the winter and it like cracks and you just have water pouring into your house, pouring into your basement, you want to be able to shut your water off fast. So you have to find your main water valve. And so when you find your main water valve, there's usually going to be, before that, about a foot, kind of up to 2 feet of pipe that come in to your house. And so that's how you'll be able to tell what kind of water pipe you have. There's like 4 kind of main things that it could be. It could either be like a poly pipe, it could either be black, or I've even seen like PEX. So that's just like a style of poly pipe. It could be blue. A lot of times it's copper, which is also good. It's very safe to drink out of. It's very stable. Then there's lead, and then there's galvanized. And been in houses before where the water is completely stopped, and to like a certain bathroom or to the whole house, you might just be getting drips through. So that is the problem with galvanized. Over time, it rusts, and the little rust particles will break off, and then they'll get jammed inside the fittings. But galvanized, it might cause you to have to make a decision, in a matter of a couple of days, whether or not you're going to be breaking up your whole front yard or driveway, or having to put a new water pipe into the city side. So it's never a fun cost.
So when we are looking at houses and we do come across this kind of stuff with regards to purchasing a house, how do we price this stuff out? Do we always just call a plumber? I mean, we get inspector.
I actually don't know. I think it's going to be a little more expensive in Toronto to do it as well. So like and it also depends. There's a few, like obviously, like if your house is like built up, you're going to have to dig down 11 feet or something, or like if you have a basement, it's going to suck. So the cost is always different. But yeah, just get a hold of a plumber and they'll be able to give you obviously a price for it. It's not going to be cheap. Like on the low end, like $3,000 to get you a new water line, and that's like in the perfect circumstances. On the high end, it could be like $10,000 to get a new water pipe into your house. But honestly, it's you really want to look out for that when you're moving into a house, and at least know if you have it or not, and at least be able to budget for it in the future.
I guess that kind of just goes into the general question. And this is like the big kind of thing that I'm wondering about, and that everyone's wondering about, is that what are the things that we need to know about our houses and what's going to cost us money or health risks in the future? So
it's like your main services coming into your house. So like your main water line could be a huge headache, like I said. Another thing is your main drain to your house. It's like your main building drain. So that comes out from your house, like that collects all the waste and the wastewater from your house and takes it out to the city side. So it's good to know, at least if you have like a newer main drain. If you live in an older house, you most likely don't have a newer main drain. If you have a clay weeping tile, or like a clay drain, and a lot of the old places have that, they're just really susceptible to roots and to collapse. And so I've fixed so many drains where we had to like dig people's yards, and that's a big deal as well, because it can collapse, and then before you know it, like you have water backing up into your basement, and like you can't use all your bathrooms, and before you can use them again, you have to get somebody there. You think it might just be a snake call, like a plumbing drain snake call to snake out the blockage, but then like it could be a cracked pipe, and then it's a kind of a whole bag of worms that you have to get into again. It's like a big dig. You have to dig up the front yard.
Is that like poo poo in the basement kind of issue?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's not good,
Yeah.
especially if you have a basement you don't go into, it could be backing up. And then before you even know it, it's kind of a problem.
So how am I going to know if there's a problem? Is it just like, how do I know if I have this clay pipe?
You can't really see where it's clay coming out of the ground because it's mostly underground where the clay is going to be. If you have cast iron drains in your house, you can almost assume that you're going to have like a clay main drain, or it could be a steel main drain, but the same thing as like a cast iron main drain, but it's going to have the same problems where it could collapse. So there is a program in Ontario. It's like a little hack that I use. If you want to know like what your main drain is made out of, or if there's any problems with your main drain, or if you've just moved into a house and you want to get it inspected, kind of like a one-time thing, but you can call Ontario One Call, and they have a sewer safety inspection line. What it's actually used for is to make sure if you have a blockage in your drain, to make sure that it wasn't a gas line that got torpedoed through your drain. So then if a plumber comes to snake it, and they end up like running through a gas line, they set this program up and they'll be able to come and locate your main drain, which is also good. And then they'll tell you, you can see if there's roots running through your drain, which is also a big problem. That is just in my mind, it's like one of the best things that you can do for yourself. A diagnostic test on your home, to see what's going on below the surface.
Great. So if anyone's thinking of selling their house sometime in the near future, you recommend doing this sooner than later?
Yes, I would want it done as well before I kind of bought a house to see like the health of the drain. It'd be a great selling feature. If I knew the drain was great and it had no problems with it, that'd be like excellent to me.
We've gone over main drain and what that is and how that can affect. What are some other things people need to know about their house?
So there's a couple other things here that I just have like some things that cause floods in a home. There's some simple things like if you have a fridge like with an ice maker or a water line, what I would do is I'd pull, like you can just usually pull the fridge out. It's usually on wheels. Or you can look usually under your kitchen sink, and that's kind of where the fridge will most oftentimes connect to, the fridge line. And you want to look for the water line. And so if that water line is a clear plastic tube, you might want to think about changing that water line out. They just go after like 10 to 15 years, they just burst. So that's the thing to think about. Like you don't want to really be drinking that water if you're dealing with like degrading plastics. But I've seen that happen a lot of times where these lines burst and then, it's a big insurance claim or, big floods can happen that way, especially if it happens when the people aren't home. And I also want to talk about sump pumps. So a sump pump basically catches all of the groundwater that's kind of like under and around your structure. And so a lot of times people have a weeping tile set up where it's either perforated or in the older school houses, it'd be like a clay pipe that would run around your house and it would drain into your sump pit. And then so your sump pump is the pump that basically discharges groundwater out of your premises. A big thing with sump pumps, especially with people in Toronto, at a certain point, you're going to have a lot of groundwater and in certain areas of Toronto. So people don't usually like to pump that water back onto the yard or back onto the street. It creates a bunch of ice. It creates this, that. You just have like a giant pool of water kicking around the yard. So what people would often do is plumb that into their main drain, which is frowned upon. And I will tell you why, because if there's ever a situation like we've had in Toronto, remember there was that giant rainstorm and it was like insane. And like, I remember like water was gushing up out of the manholes and stuff. Like, yeah. And so like there was huge floods. And so everybody that had this system set up, because the groundwater was so high, and then also the main drains were blocked in the city from like combined sewer and storm systems. So what your house was trying to do was pump out water that was like from the hydrological system was like raising up in your ground. They were trying to pump it out, but what was happening was they were pumping it into a main drain that was blocked. And so people's basements just got filled up with like 3 feet of water, and it was like a really bad scene. So if I was you, if I owned a home, if I was selling a home, if I was buying a home, I'd check to make sure that your sump pump is exiting out of the house, like out through a wall, and not draining into your main drain.
For laymen, what you're saying is there's an electrical pump that's in a hole in the basement, and if that hole is representing the water that's coming up from the ground, if it comes up,
exactly,
that pump itself turns on only when the water comes up to a certain level, and it either
correct
to the street, or what's frowned upon if it kicks it into the main drain.
Exactly. Yes, your main drain. Yeah, your building drain. Yeah, correct.
So and does every house have a sump pump? Should every house have a sump pump?
Not every house will have one. If you have like a small crawl space, if you don't have a very deep basement, sometimes you won't have one. But I would say 90% of homes do have one, and so it's good to know the health of that pump, what's going on with it. In Collingwood, the water table here is so high that people are changing their sump pumps out like once a year, once every year and a half. So we're at like the base of Blue, and so all of the water just it all runs down the mountain, and then we're like in the flood zone basically, or swamp zone basically. So.
Why do they have to change it out every year?
Just because it'll start running a lot slower, like any kind of electrical motor, any motor in general over time will just, its quality will kind of deteriorate. And so, yeah, it's just burnt out. Its life cycle is done. I would check that out if I owned a home.
One thing that a lot of people are probably wondering is, if I have a sump pump, how do I know it's working properly?
What you can do is a sump pump will have a float on it, like a float switch, and that will either be right on the side of the sump pump, or it'll be like a little ball floating in the sump pit. And so a kind of a good way to check that is if you go and you lift the ball up so that it's vertical, what should happen is the sump pump will turn on and will drain all the water in the pit. And if there's no water in the pit already, like if it's very low, then you're in a good situation. Or alternatively, there could be a float on the kind of the side of the sump pump, so there'll be like a little rail, and that float will be on the rail. So you just want to lift it up to the top of the rail, and that'll kick the sump pump on, and then you just want to see how quickly it basically drains the pit. That should be draining within like a matter of 10-15 seconds. You should be able to drain the whole pit, depending on the size. But I would say in most cases, like 10 to 15 seconds should drain it.
Or we just call you to do that.
Yeah, that's also another good thing. Call a plumber, get your house checked out, let them show you where all the stuff is, how everything works.
That's actually a good solid question. How often should someone just come in just to check?
Like if you just buy a house, for sure, get a plumber to come in and take a look at everything and show you, because as you probably know, people will try to slip things under your nose. You might buy a house with problems that you never knew about, which I've seen happen a lot of times. And then a plumber, they can come with a camera and they can show you the problems with the place. They can show you what's going on. They can check like the things, like I said, with the plastic fridge line. They can check to make sure if you have a galvanized or a lead water line. They can show you where your main valves are. They can point you to a whole myriad of different problems with your house that you may have, especially if it's an older place, And if it's a half decent and honest plumber, they'll kind of show you what's what. And for a service call, for one, for maybe whatever, if it's a minimum 3-hour service call, or if it's like a jacked up first hour service call, it's well worth it. You could end up saving yourself thousands, really.
What you're saying is, don't be afraid to call a plumber. It's going to save you money in the long run, because water damage is probably, if not the most concerning thing when it comes to houses. The main thing that I'm looking at is the roof, and if there's any water damage in the basement. And
yeah, for sure.
Water damage is pretty much the most costly thing that you're going to find.
Yeah, absolutely. I also had another thing that I wanted to talk about, just for people that if they have high water bills. If your water bill is high, there's a couple common culprits. So one of them is a toilet that's running. And your toilet could actually run for 2 different reasons most of the time. The first reason would be a flapper that has kind of deteriorated, where it gets a little bit of a bacon effect around the rubber ring that's supposed to keep all of the water inside of the tank of the toilet. And so clearly, if it's not like perfectly flat and creating a good seal, there's going to be water running in your toilet. And then you'll also notice your toilet will be like kicking on every once in a while, because as the water level goes down in your tank, the float on your fill valve will go down. And so that'll cause it to kick on. But over time, that can cause a lot of money. It happens when somebody's not home and that thing just gets like stuck open a little bit, and the water just runs and runs and runs all weekend when you're enjoying your ski vacation or something, and you come home, you notice the water's been running, but it's been like, could have filled up like an Olympic-sized swimming pool while you were gone, So that's a big thing. You can fix it yourself most of the time, the flapper. There's a valve on every toilet. Every single toilet will have a valve.
Okay.
And so you can turn that valve off, flush the toilet, make sure no water's coming up into the toilet, take that piece out, you take the flapper out, take it to Home Depot, and they will most likely have one that fits your toilet.
But the ones that do have tanks, you go in, you take off your porcelain tank, and then you take out that thing that plugs the hole.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know.
Flapper. Yeah.
I like talking about plumbing stuff because it just makes me laugh because I'm immature. But
yeah, it's very yes. Yeah.
Take the flapper out and then go to Home Go or wherever your local store, and what is it, like $5, $10, $20? Like it's
Yeah, between $5 and $15, honestly. Yeah, like unless you might have a Kohler or a Toto, maybe a little different, maybe a little more expensive, but most of the time it's pretty cheap, pretty easy fix.
and that'll save you money in the long run.
Save you lots of money, I believe. Yeah, and then so the other thing is your fill valve. Sometimes those will just over time. A lot of times it happens with the Toto toilets, especially, and like higher end toilets with their own fill valves. So that thing will just get kicked on the internal float, and it just will kind of be constantly filling up, and kind of running into your toilet. So that's another thing. You may want to call a plumber for that one.
Yeah. How do I know if this stuff is happening? Like, am I just looking at my water bill, or am I going to know by how do I diagnose this?
You'll be able to hear your toilet running is the main way. Every once in a while, you hear the sound of your toilet turning on, and you just hear it like filling up, and it may even have a little bit of a jiggle when it stops. And I think oftentimes people will hear that. Maybe they think it's nothing. I don't know, but that is a common cause of high water bill.
It brings me back to days when I was renting a university and I didn't want to get up, but you could just hear it running for a long time. But I wasn't paying the water bill, so it didn't matter.
Yeah, I actually have on my own toilet, and I'm a plumber. The cobbler's kids go shoeless. But I have a thing on my toilet right now where I actually have to like jam the handle back up so that it kind of like sets properly. Otherwise, it'll be constantly running. And I did notice a difference in my water bill. So. And another thing, if you have a high water bill, I'm going to tie two things together here. Sometimes if you have a smell in your home or a high water bill, it can be coming from the same culprit, and that could be an old floor drain in your basement. What keeps the smell out of your house and from the sewer is called a trap. So it's just a P-trap, and it's just basically a little U in the pipe. So that U should always have water in it. It should always have water in it in your kitchen sink. It should always have water in it if you have floor drains. It should always have water in your bathtub or shower drains. And that water is called a trap seal. It's what, like I said, keeps the smell out of your house. So if those ever get dried up, like in your basement, a lot of times if you have a funky smell, you're like, oh, what is that sewer smell? It's because of a trap has dried up. And then conversely, if you have a very high water bill, it could be the device that is used to keep the water in that trap in the floor drains. Oftentimes it'll run to like a laundry sink. So if you go look at it and you notice like you can hear a little bit of water running in your basement, it's because there's something wrong with the trap seal primer. And that's just the device that keeps the water in that trap. I know we're getting a little bit into the weeds here with like the kind of technical talk, but those two problems, both related to floor drains, could save you some headaches. If you notice the smell, all you got to do is just go dump a bucket of water in your floor drain oftentimes, and it'll clear that right up.
So I'm walking downstairs, my basement smells, I can't figure out what it is. First thing you would suggest to do is take a bucket of water and put it in the floor drain?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And flush toilets and turn on sinks as often as possible, kind of?
Yeah, like if you have a sink in the basement and nobody's used it for like 6 months or something, the same thing could also happen where that water's just dried up, it's evaporated, and then you're getting sewer gas in the house.
A lot of people need to hire plumbers for all these reasons you're talking about, and then some. How do I pick a plumber? And and conversely, can we get a hold of you ever if we need to? I'll put your information here, but can you just tell us what kind of certifications or what kind of qualifications maybe you needed, or generally what we should do for plumbers when we're hiring them?
Yeah, for sure. So honestly, God, like now with like the internet, it's just so easy to find kind of good people. Like back in the day, you just kind of pick up the phone book and then just start calling, and whoever answered, that's who you kind of got to your house. But now you can go on websites like HomeStars, or you can even see like Google reviews are great, because if he has screwed up big time in the past, somebody will write about it on the internet. So as for certifications and stuff, I mean, it's always good to have a licensed plumber. But even when I wasn't licensed, like when I was a 5th and 4th year apprentice, I was out in a van kind of doing the job of same as a plumber every day and fixing problems and figuring things out. And so I wouldn't say you exactly need a licensed guy. It's always good to have one. It just kind of lets you know that they've at least been doing it for long enough to get a license.
I would love to know about building sustainably and looking to the future to, use as little amount of water as possible around the world, whether it be here in Toronto or somewhere abroad. a lot of David Attenborough stuff, so I'm feeling extra bad about myself. But what are
Mm-hmm.
the trends? Where are we going within the plumbing industry with regards to technology and moving forward?
One of the things is just reducing the amount of water you use. So like toilet tanks have been reduced probably 2/3 in size, and they often will have a dual flush mechanism where you can flush if you just go number one, or you can flush even bigger if you go number two.
So you're talking about when you look at the top of a toilet, there's a
Yes.
small one that you
Yes.
press, or there's a big one,
Uh-huh.
big ones for the big business you do, and the small ones for the small business.
So that's kind of like, that's a pretty big deal. That's a lot of water saved. You wouldn't believe how much water is just flushed down the drain.
How much water are we talking about? I don't know if you have the stats or anything like that.
I wish I had that number for you, Russell, but I don't have that offhand. But here, I'll show you with my hands basically. So the old toilet tanks were like this big, like this, and then the new ones are like this.
You're still doing the same thing though.
Still doing the same thing. Yeah, it's just like the engineering on the toilet has gotten a lot better to be able to get the waste and get everything out of the toilet with one swift flush. Another thing is tankless water heaters. One of like the big things everybody asks me about. Like, are they good? Should I get one? They're a little more expensive off the start, but like over 10 years could save you like $160 a year. Over the course of its life, it'll pay for itself. They're about $1,600 a reasonable size house.
What is a tankless water heater? How do I know? Like, can you just
Gotcha. Yes.
Don't know what it is?
Yeah, for sure. So usually, like I think people will have an idea what their current hot water heater looks like. It'll be a giant, like refrigerator-sized cylindrical holding tank in your basement. Basically, the thing that's wrong with that is you're paying to heat a bunch of hot water even when you're not using it, because that thing just has an on-off switch, and when it gets below a certain temperature, the heat kicks on, whether it's gas or whether it's electric, and so you're just keeping all that water hot for no reason. But a tankless, it'll just basically give you hot water on demand. And also, I don't know if you've ever had the problem where your hot water runs out. With the tankless, you don't have that. If you wanted to run 15 bathtubs full of hot water, you could do it, and you'd have no problems doing it.
What's in there that's making it hot? Like how does it work?
So it's basically like a mini boiler. There is electric ones. I would suggest to not get an electric one. The Navians and the Reams and stuff, they have a mini boiler. It also has heat exchangers. I haven't like completely taken one of these things apart and inspected it all myself, but this is what I've been kind of told and what I've seen a little bit of. And so basically it just like kind of rapidly heats the water as it's passing through the machine. And so the cold water comes in one side, gets fired, goes through these heat exchangers that are getting all the heat on them from the gas power. And so then it comes out the other side, hot and great to use. Yeah, they're great. They're honestly fantastic.
Because a lot of people have rental, like everyone's renting water tanks.
Oh God, that's a racket, man. Don't rent hot water tanks. Just spend the money up front. They'll nab you.
I mean, like pretty much not every, but most houses that people are buying these days have hot water rentals.
Yes.
Why should or shouldn't they?
First of all, it's hard to get out of those rental contracts. But if you have the opportunity, I would say just spend the money up front. Otherwise, you'll end up spending like over the course of your hot water tank's life. You could have bought like 5 or 6 hot water tanks, you know. So just if that's one thing you should fork out for at the start, it's that. It'll just save you a lot of money in the long run, I believe.
Okay.
So another thing, just we were talking about like things coming up in the future and like ways to save water, and I think that's a big one. You know, like we have so much fresh water, we're never going to run out of fresh water where we are. You know, like I'm on Georgian Bay, you guys are on Lake Ontario, we're fine that way. But our big thing is just the amount that we're putting back through the drainage system. And so like when we overload the drainage system, and then if there's like a big storm or something happens, then they just open the floodgates and it goes into Lake Ontario. You know, it's like, it's not good. So that's just the big thing. It's just kind of like using less water to not tax our waste systems as much.
And using less water means what? Are we talking about like, are you conscious when you're getting in the shower or washing dishes or?
Yeah, so you can be conscious when you're doing that kind of thing. Like a good thing about like all showers basically now, and like even a lot of like sinks and everything else that kind of other than bathtubs, like everything has little flow restrictors on it. So that kind of limits the gallons per minute or like the liters per minute that you're going to be running through that system. So that's great. There's also like, I just saw on my Instagram the other day, I was being targeted by Moen, and they have this like new system that I use different kinds of flow restrictors that give you really good water pressure, but not a lot of water volume. So like it felt like you're having a good shower, but it was using like a half the water or a quarter of the amount of water. And then other than that, I just mean, you know, like dishwashers and stuff are getting much more efficient. So kind of where the future is going for water. I've thought of a couple more things as well. I just off the top of my head, I just remembered. So solar power water heaters, what it will do is kind of put it back through your hot water tank at a higher temperature than it would be coming out of the ground or coming out of your main water pipe, so that you're just like saving energy that way. And then also in every new house, they're installing a thing called a power pipe. And so if it's also like on a big enough renovation or a brand new house, and what that is a heat exchanger essentially that is installed on the main drain that collects waste from one or more showers. And so when the hot water from the shower is going down the drain, you replace a portion of traditionally like a plastic main drain with a copper drain. And so around the drain, it's coiled externally. Don't worry, it's not like running, your new water is not running through your bad stuff. It wraps around the drain and then it kicks it back into your hot water tank so that apparently it works. They're a pain in the ass to install, but apparently the research is out and the jury's in. It's good.
So there's hot water going around a coil around the drain that's coming into the tank. So the water's already warm coming in.
Yes, I think the thing we haven't gone over though is like people with roots in their drains, and
people
maybe if you have roots in your drains, so like that is yes,
roots.
Yes, tree roots. And so like that is like kind of a big problem for your main drain. Other than a collapse, like a root is like one of the biggest things. Like tree roots can actually hear water, and like they've done research that they've shown that like if they have a little bit of running water, even if they play the sound of running water, tree roots will grow towards it, and so they will get into your main drain like any way they can if they can find like a little break. And that was also the problem with the clay drains, is because they're kind of like loose on the joints. They're just like shoved together like hub and spigot style. So the roots will get in there, and then over time, like the pressure and like the swelling of the roots will collapse your drains. And so anyways, if you have roots in your drain, what I would do is just get a plumber to come in every kind of spring, in the early spring, and get them to just to bore your pipes out with a root cleaning head. And that will save you from, getting a big backup.
If there's a root going through the pipe, so you have to replace the whole pipe?
No. Obviously, I'll tell you to do it. If you ask me, I'll tell you to replace it. But you can really just get like regular maintenance done, and you'll be okay. I think the cost kind of, it's a very big cost to replace your main drain, but getting a guy in for $200, $300 once a year to just like make sure your roots are kind of cut back to where they should be is also like a good compromise, I think. A thing I'll say for when the house starts to get older is you should kind of be checking on your hot water tank once every couple months. If you have a traditional style hot water tank, look around the bottom, look around the top, see if there's any rust spots happening on it. Because over time, those will leak, and like the water will kind of just eat through the hot water tank, and you can get a leak that way. Grease in your drains.
Oh,
Russell. Yeah. Grease in your drains is like, you may not think it's a big deal. You may just think, I know, but I've been pouring bacon grease down my drains for years and nothing's happened yet. Well, let me tell you, my friend, that problem can come to a head real fast. And I don't know if you heard that story in London where they called it like the Fatberg. Well, anyways, there's this giant like grease, feminine hygiene product, baby wipe, and like diaper, like backup in the main drain and in like the main London sewers. And so these guys were having to like blast it with like 15,000 PSI, like hot water, having to like cut chunks of it out. Like you would not believe how hard old grease can get in your drains. And it might not seem like a problem, but it may just be like your drain's working fine right now. And then one day, it just stops working and it starts like filling up. And you wouldn't believe how many calls I get as well on like Thanksgiving and Christmas from people saying, "Oh, my drain's fixed. Can you come like call it?" And nobody wants to work on Christmas and like it's really the turkey holidays for some reason. I don't know what it is, but that's when you get all the calls for that kind of thing. And so the problem is once you put all that grease and stuff in your drain, it's so hard to get out. You can call somebody to do a snake call. And so basically like I have like this little kind of drill powered hand snake and it runs like maybe a 25 or a 50-foot coil about the size of like your pinky finger down your drain. And yeah, it should clear it out. But when there's grease, it just kind of like, it like goes in and then comes back out. None of it goes away and it just seals back up. So just don't pour it down your drains. Don't put coffee grounds down your drains. No feminine hygiene products. Do not use baby wipes. If people use baby wipes, I know it's a huge thing right now. Just stick to the toilet paper or throw the baby wipes in the trash, or get one of those tushies, like one of those little mini bidets that attaches to your toilet. Oh. If you're really focused on keeping a clean behind, I would say those are like the main things. Because especially people say that, oh, but they're biodegradable. They're not. Those things will stay in your drains forever and they'll get like lodged up on stuff and they're terrible. So bad for your drains. Please don't put them down your drains.
So a big thing that we deal with, and you actually help me out with, is we get little clogs in our drains every once in a while, whether it be hair or it's gunk or whatever it is, especially it seems to happen in bathroom sinks.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do we do about like little clogs? I know you coached me through one recently. So, you really helped me out, but let's kind of go into the do's and don'ts of clogged drains and what products are available that we shouldn't or should be using.
Okay. So the number one thing to definitely do not do for a clogged drain is put Drano down it, especially if you're in an older house, because those, what that stuff will do, it will eat through the metal pipes in your house. And so like a lot of times you'll have a copper or you'll have a cast iron drain. And so, you may think you're doing yourself a favor by skipping the plumber call and putting a $20 jug of Drano down your drain. But what will happen is it'll settle in the cast iron and it will literally chew through the cast iron drain. And so like you may, put it in an upstairs sink. What you don't realize is that little 1.5-inch sink goes into a 3-inch main drain. It could be running all the way across your living room. And then you're going to get a pressure crack in the cast iron pipe and they're going to have to rip your whole ceiling out and replace the whole drain, Just don't do it. Call a plumber. We'll come with a snake. And like, we will only use that stuff in literally the most dire of circumstances if we've tried everything else. And do not let a plumber put that stuff down your drain. Don't let them do it, because there is some lazy old guys out there who will use it. Just tell them to get the snake or call a plumber who has a snake. So then bathroom drains. Bathroom drains, your sink drain and your tub drain. One of the biggest culprits is just like hair and soap scum, and like that mixture together. It makes a disgusting thing that looks like a rat when you pull it out of the drain. Try not to put hair down the drains. My wife still does it all the time, and so every once in a while I'll have to pull like a giant rat-sized thing of hair out of the drain. It's not good. An easy way to unclog your bathroom sink drain. So I don't know if you know like the typical style of plumber's plunger. Just like the rubber and like the little stick.
Yeah.
So an easy way to do it, if it's not too bad, like if it hasn't gone too far yet, is you go up to your sink. It might be filled with water. If it's not, you should put a little bit of water in it until the point the kind of water settles and it's like there's some water in the sink. Look around kind of the top of your sink for a hole. That hole is the overflow, either with your hand or, if you're a little bit more squeamish, maybe with like a yellow rubber glove or something. Kind of hold it against that hole, and then with the plunger, just go up and down over the drain. You might have to like really kind of work the thing a bit and like kind of try to blast at it, but that should usually clear up smaller problems. And then if that doesn't work, you may end up having to take the pop-up out of your sink drain, which can be a little more difficult, but it's usually not too bad. There's usually just a little nut under the sink. On the back of your drain, it's just like a little nut. It's always hand tight. And so you just unscrew it, you pop it's like a little ball, and on the end of it, there's a little kind of stick that goes into the bottom of the pop-up. So you pull that out, pull the pop-out out, it's going to come up with a bunch of hair, a bunch of soap scum, clear it up, put it back in, stick goes back through, tighten it back up again. That'll fix your problem.
You coached me through that one time. So that it was a huge help. I did go and buy Drano and
yes, of course. Everybody does.
And I went and got another thing that was even stronger than Drano because I was like, this and that. So like I had to wear like a gas mask and like
get
out of the house for a little while, and then you yelled at me and it was you were much better off just doing it the old school way
for sure. And the worst thing is a lot of times too, what people do is like they'll have the sink filled up to the top with water. And then they just go, I'll throw Drano down it. And then they pour Drano into a sink full of water, which basically negates the Drano altogether anyways. It just makes it a sink full of Drano and water. And it's like always so diluted that the acid actually can't do its job. And then when I come to your house to actually have to fix the problem, I'm dealing with like a sink full of Drano and grease and smell and just, yeah, don't do it.
That's good. That I feel like that's got to be one of the bigger ones for people.
That's a huge one for sure. Everybody does it. Everybody does it, yeah. Until you're in the, like, until a plumber yells at you to not do it, people do it all the time. And it also will stain your fixtures. It will stain your sink. It will stain any metal thing you have on your sink. So that's kind of a big deal.
I want to know, and everyone here is going to want to know, how do we get a hold of you if we have questions? And, you know, I know you're a great plumber and you have your plumbing business going on. How would people hire you and get a hold of you?
If you're in the Collingwood area, I'm mostly just working up here now. I try not to go to Toronto too much anymore, but you can just give me a call. And I think earlier you said you might put my information at the bottom of the screen. If you're in the city, you can call the company I used to work for. I charge plumbing, ATTARD.
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there anything else that people should know? Is there anything before we jump off here? Is there anything else you want to share?
Oh God, not that I can think of off the top of my head. As soon as this call ends, I'll probably have about 15 more things that I think of, and that I wish I had told Russell that. But yeah, man, I think I've almost covered everything. For if you have a clogged toilet, what you should do, go get yourself an accordion style plunger. And that is like what plumbers use to unclog toilets. We don't use the typical rubber kind. That is mostly for sinks because it fits better over a sink drain. It doesn't fit as good over a toilet drain. So you get the accordion one, it works well. If you're having a problem where the toilet's getting clogged quite frequently, and that's just biological issues, you know, everybody's different. You can get a little drain snake, I don't know, maybe 5 feet long, and it comes with a coil on the end. It's kind of like a metal pole, and so you like pull out, and the cable goes into the pole, and you put it in the drain, and then you push it down, do a couple twists, and like that is one of my main lines of defense for any clogged toilet. So we get to the shitty stuff last, you know.
What I really want to say is thank you. It's really good to be speaking to a professional plumber, to be able to get the information from you who actually sees it every day. And if anyone wants to go check out an awesome plumber in Collingwood, or just call Derek up, we'll have his information here and you can get in touch with him. Thanks, Derek.
Great.